Greetings, all. Welcome to Aquarian Diary. It is March 19th, 2023. At least that's when this is being recorded. I am very pleased today to have a special guest with me for a spontaneous discussion, and her name is Velvet Phillips-Sullivan. Hi, Velvet.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I want to kind of give people a little bit of a background so they understand what's happening and why. And So what happened was around the end of February, at the very end of February, I kind of put out that I was going to do readings and asked people to contact me if they were interested in having an astrology reading. And then you wrote me, and we ended up going back and forth, and then we ended up chatting and talking um, using WhatsApp. And we ended up having all of these conversations that were really interesting. And you sent me your astrology. I didn't actually do a reading for you, like sort of professionally, but I saw your chart and there was all kinds of like really amazing synastry in our chart. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So, anyway, we kind of became friends and have been going back and forth a lot over the past 2 or 3 weeks. And so, to start out, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I live in Montana. I'm living in a blue bubble in a red sea. And I like that expression.
It's
Um,
a great
uh,
expression.
and I just finished my Saturn return and have gone through a lot of transformation in the last. Let me back up. So I had cut my hair in almost probably 12 years. And yesterday I went outside and shaved my head and felt like that as I didn't get it till this morning, but all that hair that had been on my head had been on my head since Pluto moved into Capricorn.
Oh my God, you're kidding.
And I didn't realize it till this morning. And so by shaving my head, I felt like
Yeah.
I was letting go of all kinds of things that I had digested, but didn't need to carry around with me anymore.
Oh, that is so
So
cool. I love that.
yeah, so now I look like a little bit like a bowling ball, a little bit like a weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I mean, I look like so many different things now that I can't define myself.
Well, I don't have any hair. What the hell am I going to do?
Well, I felt like I had attachments to my hair and to the past and who I thought I was, so I just shaved
It was
it.
your body literally created that during that time span you were describing.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
And you're
thinking.
like
And
carrying it around. You're wearing it on your crown chakra.
yeah, exactly. And part of it was because, I had done Kundalini yoga and they really recommended that you not cut your hair for all kinds of different reasons. And as a
Uh,
citizen scientist, I said, well, I want to know if there's any truth in that.
well, I think that's very symbolic and the timing is remarkable. I have been talking a lot about this weird void that we've been in, but then in the past day or two, I've really felt the new energy starting to come in. So it's
Yes.
it's 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 really intense, and it feels like we're on the cusp of this shift I've been anticipating for a long time.
Yeah. And that's what it feels like to me. And that the significance of meeting you, Saturn moving into Pisces,
Right?
cutting my hair, and now the equinox and Pluto moving into Capricorn. That I feel like I'm like a newborn. The only time my hair has been this short is when I was born.
Wow. That really? So you've never done this before?
I've never done it before, ever.
Wow. Um, Oh, that's very cool. It's funny, I was having a conversation with an old friend yesterday, literally, and he was asking, how things are going and stuff. He's in Vancouver. And I was saying, if I can get the readings and maybe some kind of mentoring stuff going or whatever, I could conceivably get rid of all my stuff and just have my
Mhm.
computer and I could go and be anywhere as long as I
Hmm.
had the internet.
Right.
And
Right.
so I'd be like a not a vagabond, but that but so it sort of ties into with your idea of your hair because it for me it would be like just letting go of all the stuff from the past,
Right.
which is kind of a cool way to start a new cycle.
Yes. And I work with the meridian system, and according to that tradition that I study, a week before the equinox and a week after, we go back into the earth element, the stomach and spleen meridian. So we're digesting what's happened over the last 3 months from the last, like for the solstice, the winter
Yeah.
solstice. And we can't fully move into the liver gallbladder energy, the wood element, the spring, until we've digested and got rid of what we don't need from the last. And so I think that this idea that we have to be able to let go of stuff when it's time
Yeah.
is super important.
Yeah, that's what I think this void thing I've been talking about is all about, literally. Like I woke up a couple days ago quite early because as I've described, I've been having these really weird sleep patterns. It's a little better now, but I was waking up at like really early in the morning. Um, anyway, a couple days ago when I first woke up, I was just like, it was just total void. Like there was nothing. And I don't mean it was like scary, negative, nothing. It was just like an emptiness, which to me is kind of like, I guess it felt like that marked the peak of that cycle of ending. And then yesterday I felt positive energy, but not just for myself, because I think I actually asked you about it. I felt that this positive energy was more in the collective,
I
which is
think I
very promising. Like I believe I said this, sorry to cut you off, but I believe
no,
I
that's
said
fine.
this also to you yesterday that, you know, this period that we have been through with Pluto and Capricorn has been traumatic on a lot of different levels.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot. I mean, for me, it's been a lot of changing who I thought I was and
Mm.
trying different things. And some of them worked and some of them didn't work. And now I feel like it was a really heavy time. And not that Pluto and Aquarius won't have its own challenges,
Right.
but it feels like um, there's a lightness coming. It's sort of like it's not here yet, but you can sort of like when you're looking through a tunnel, you can see the light, and it feels like that light is there. And maybe it's just like that liver energy, that chi, that life force is growing within us and in the earth.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's air, right? We're going from earth to air.
Right.
And at least, you have some Sag points and I'm a Sag sun, so that's a more conducive, air with fire.
Yeah.
So, I that's probably it's also more of an intellectual energy, which is something I'm just more comfortable with, I think. Um, more upper chakra, I would say.
Right. Well, and it feels like, again, because I work with the Chinese medicine perspective, they talk about how wind creates a quickening,
Mm.
that it gets the atoms dancing a little faster and spreads them out a little bit
Yeah. Well, look, I'd asked you a little bit about yourself because, and
more. I bet.
I'm pretty sure other people are going to be like, okay, who is Velvet? And we don't need like a full resume or life story or
Okay.
anything, but just like you do a lot of interesting things. Like you make your living in these sort of metaphysical arts, right?
Yes, yes,
Which is pretty cool.
yes. I became a reflexologist in May of 20, or in May of 2001. So right before a really big shift in the American mind, the right before September 11th. And so reflexology, I work on people's feet to help balance their systems. It's like a works with the meridian system and stuff. And then I opened up a little metaphysical shop in my town before it was super Red Sea-ish. I mean,
When did that begin to happen? Like around 2016?
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, there was always a bit of a conservative element here. Um, but the propaganda, the misinformation, because I live in the West and a lot of people have guns, that NRA, the gun thing was, I think, started a lot of anti-government sentiment, and some of the environmental things that have been played out here, economic and environmental issues have played out here, and because of propaganda talk radio, the working class started to kind of fight the environmental changes that were happening. So it's like a bowling ball that's been rolling downhill actually since the 80s, but it's accelerated since 2016.
Yeah, and
So
I didn't want to derail your resume.
that's okay. No, I'm easily I'm a Vata, which I'm windy, so it's really easy to get me on a tangent.
Yeah, you had mentioned your bookstore, which is pretty cool. Sorry, and because what you're talking about is really interesting, of course, because there's a lot of people who've been gravitating to that region for all kinds of reasons.
Yes.
But still, back to the bookstore.
Okay, so I had a little metaphysical rock shop, and I had books, and had kind of created a little healing arts center. There was an acupuncturist, a couple massage therapists, a tattoo artist, cranial sacral. I became a yoga teacher during that time. I taught my yoga there and led meditations, and I did that. And then in 2019, I did an astrology reading with a woman, and she told me a year from now, you're not going to recognize your life. Your life is going to change so much that you won't recognize it. And she told me to say this little affirmation: put me where I need to be, let me know what I need to know. And I really said that every day. And then when COVID hit, I knew that's what she was talking about. I don't think she had any. I don't think she knew that how it was going to manifest. She just saw it in my chart, and probably a lot of people's charts. But so then when oh, a year to the day after I did that reading with her, I knew I was supposed to shut my shop down. So I shut it down, and have been doing reflexology, and I work with the Akashic records, and I created a modality called Divine Blueprint Restoration, and um, I still teach some yoga. I just try to show up for people.
And you teach Kundalini yoga, right? You're a certified instructor.
Yep, yep.
And that's a point of mutual interest because I have practiced Kundalini yoga on and off for many years myself.
And I think that was why I reached out to you, because that was a connection point for us. You hadn't even seen my chart yet or anything, and
Yeah.
we started connecting because of that technology, and how that technology, I think, supported me through. Actually, that technology really supported me through the transformations of Pluto and Capricorn.
There's a couple of the people I've done readings for, a few actually, I've suggested that they consider it because of the kind of issues that they're dealing with.
Well, and when I was in the shop, because it was metaphysical, I got all kinds of people in different stages of awakening. And the ones that were having the most acute traumatic awakening were the ones that were really drawn to Kundalini, and the ones that were really helped by that technology.
Hmm.
So when there was some, I don't want to call it political stuff going on with the Kundalini community, and I had to do some soul searching and decide whether or not I wanted to continue teaching. It was because of my own personal experience and the experience of people who were in traumatic acute awakening that I continued to teach.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with Kundalini yoga was I was introduced to it by an ex-girlfriend many years ago, who was an instructor, but I've never practiced it kind of communally or in any kind of group setting. It's always been just me on my own. So I didn't have a lot of attachments to any particular figures within the movement or within the practice. So I was connecting directly with the practice and the energy of it itself. So I didn't really necessarily have a problem separating the two things.
Well, and I think I didn't on one hand because where I live, we're so far away from, $90 yoga classes.
Yeah.
And again, I had really grounded, down to earth teachers that weren't cultish at all. And so I learned it as a technology to support people.
Yeah, I believe I was guided to it because of what I was experiencing at the time, and it turned out to be extremely helpful and transformative. So I am profoundly grateful to it, and I express that every time I practice.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily for everybody. I think
No.
what a lot of people don't really understand, perhaps, or because I'm sure a lot of people don't even know what Kundalini yoga is, but it's more of like working with energy than it is like hatha yoga.
Right. Well, and what I was taught is that um, there are 16 schools, or 16, 20 schools of yoga, and Kundalini yoga is like the mother of them all. It's from the brand, it's the tree that they all come from. And so when you do Kundalini, you're doing all of those schools of yoga, and you can specifically do more hatha like practices, or more bhakti or
Hmm.
shakti,
Hmm.
that you can kind of do more of those individual practice or schools, but it's the big broad umbrella. And to me, as a systems analyst, with the reflexology, I work with systems and understand how systems integrate together. That to me, it is one of the most integrative systems of movement and body, mind, and soul that I've come across.
Yeah, you mean I think we talked about it early on in our conversations, and I was saying that I don't really understand how it works, but it does.
Yeah. And I only, my understanding of how it works is I actually started practicing it in 2003. That's when I first started, and kind of went away for a while. And then again, when I was going through like around 2008, I started going to yoga or to Kundalini again, and it just was it's my medicine, it's my practice. And though I
Hmm.
value all the other traditions, it's the one that super resonates with me.
Yeah, I think I said to you that I love Kundalini yoga, and I mean that very sincerely.
Yeah.
And even like I sometimes go through periods where I'm not practicing it just because for
Yeah.
whatever reason, that sometimes you're really busy or whatever. Um, but I will always uh, be very attached to it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you and I also have we share very similar political worldviews, don't we? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you mean
Yeah.
you're kind of you're quite progressive and uh now and let me say this as well because it's kind of a good segue. I have been completely blown away by the charts that I've been looking at when I've been doing readings for people. It- they're like I'm often it's jaw dropping because of what I can see in their charts and we have sometimes lengthy conversations about it. But the point of it saying that was just that when I originally put out there that I was going to do readings, I was thinking, oh, this would help justify all this time I'm spending on YouTube work. And but I hadn't really anticipated that I would be connecting with these mind-blowing people from around the world. I've been talking to people in Europe and everywhere. And um it seems to me that there's something going on there. And I don't quite have a intellectual framework for it yet, but uh there are some stunning people out there. And I'm sure there are people like that who listen to every channel, but I'm just trying to make the point of how striking and dramatic it was to me.
Well, it probably, that whole resonance thing, and even the Kundalini talks about, or that tradition talks about how reflection and projection, how basically it's physics. We start bringing to us people that resonate with us, that are going to be in a similar vibration or have a similar purpose, or whatever the languages you want to use. and you're bringing all these people together, or that's what I get the sense of, that they're connecting with you first, and then there's other connections that are going to be made.
Well, that is the next logical step, right? Is to connect people, and I'm sure there's people who listen who aren't going to get a reading or whatever. But um, my point is, it's just the caliber. Like it's these people are generally very spiritual people, like who are really that's a significant or primary focus in their lives. They often have strong psychic and intuitive abilities naturally, and but they're also walking the walk. Many of them are involved in community service and selfless service and humanitarian type work in their communities, which is like that's the ultimate, that's the highest form of spiritual expression. I'm getting chills saying that, right? When you're actually doing the work in the real world.
Right, right. Well, and you and I were in the same Pluto generation, you might say. And you know that is the generation, what I was told, that's a generation, kind of a serve or suffer kind of generation.
Yeah, the Pluto and Virgo generation you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
We came after the baby boomers with the
yeah.
Pluto and Leo.
And that part of why we are here is to serve,
Hmm. And
and we all have,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we just have different ways of serving, like what your service seems to be now. And maybe it is this, like, out, like, I want to say, like Aquarian 11th house stuff, that
Yeah,
yours is like out in the bigger world. And so far, mine has been in my small community, because I
right.
can't touch I can't touch everybody's feet.
Right. But well, there's a lot to I could go off in all kinds of directions from there. But well, first of all, let me say that not everybody I'm doing readings for example, has Pluto and Virgo. Uh, quite a few have Pluto and Leo, Pluto and Virgo, and some of the later generations show up as well. But yeah, I agree with you about Pluto and Virgo. Um, my progressed sun is in Aquarius in the 11th house now, the past few years, and which is funny because it was not long after uh, that occurred that I started YouTube, doing stuff on YouTube, which is kind of funny. But and of course I have a Sag Sun and Mercury, so I am kind of big picture. But and I also have experience in publishing. Literally, I have published magazine and done a lot of stuff online and platforms and stuff like that. So that is kind of my wheelhouse, I guess. But you and many of the people who I've done readings for are also um surrounded kind of like they're in the middle of red areas, whether they're in a little local bubble or not. It's just funny. But because I think those people are there specifically to help probably lighten those areas, like yourself.
Right, right,
And you've
right.
actually expressed to me that there has been some input or visions or things that have come to your attention about, and I don't know if you want to get into this or not, but about like what is going to happen in these kinds of places, which people would probably find interesting.
Well, and I have this map that I created based on another map, and it talked about these cities of light, and where I live is in a city of light. And a lot of these places, if you look at the what do they call it, the voting maps or whatever, they have become red. I don't think they always were red, but they've become pretty red. There's a lot of red there. And one of the things it talked about with these maps, they talked about how it would be a place where both light and dark would come, not necessarily to battle, because I think sometimes that battle's internal and we have to face our shadows. These places are going to trigger people, is basically what it said.
Mm.
And when I had my little rock shop, so I had that, and I've kind of always been kind of fascinated with prophecy since I was a little girl. And I had a lot of different elders from different traditions come into my shop and share some of their prophecy stories with me. And I think those I think, all traditions all around the world talk about this time. And I think they use different language, but it's all saying that we're coming into a time of great change.
Yeah.
And depending on how um, grounded and centered, and whether or not we've done our work, whether or not we're going to freak out and harm ourselves or others, or if we're going to be like lighthouses and just support people as they go through this mass awakening, because awakening isn't always a pretty thing.
Well, I think that's what's been going on. That's what's going on with all this insane polarization.
Yeah, right,
And that's a
right,
manifestation of this in a period of awakening that we're going through.
right.
It's triggering the darkness within people.
Sure. And because one of the teachings of Kundalini yoga is the Piscean age, which theoretically we are coming out of, or we're at the cusp of the Aquarian age, depending on your perspective. It was all about duality.
Hmm.
It was also about finding your authority outside of yourself. So,
Yeah.
whether it's your religious authority, your spiritual authority, your medical authority, your governmental authority, like we seek answers outside of ourselves as a society. And the Aquarian age, as I think on those cusps, that's when all this stuff comes up, so we can see it, right? So any way that you still look outside of yourself for validation, you're going to be triggered right now.
Yeah, and there's a continuum of people who are, on one extreme extremely resistant to that, and on the other, people who are open to it. And I think it's pretty self-evident who's
Right.
who in the mix.
Well, and I also think that if you are, like, you want to call it a lighthouse, or if you're living in a place where there are a lot of people who are resisting the change, the ability to stay compassionate, um, and kindly call them on their BS when appropriate, that, I mean, I think that's we aren't going to change anybody's mind, but I had it's been a real blessing. It's not without its challenges, but with COVID, I started working on a lot of people, because they weren't afraid to be around people with COVID. And so I've found myself working on a lot of libertarians and super religious Christian little old ladies, and we built and developed relationships. And at first, they would ask me questions, like political questions or just like philosophical questions, and they were completely shocked that anyone would believe differently than them. Completely shocked. It kind of blew me away.
Yeah, I find that shocking. So, I mean, that people could be in so much of a bubble.
Yes, yes, right. And it made me realize that I kind of lived in my own little universe where people who agreed with me, so I couldn't believe that they would believe some of that stuff myself, right? So it was like a big eye opener that, but we trusted each other enough. We've gained trust in each other enough to be able to have some of these conversations that, I've opened my mind and my heart to where they're coming from, but
Right.
also to make them, I don't try to change their way of thinking. That's not my job, but to just continue to speak my truth and not be afraid that I'm going to be strung up or burned or any of that old kind of witch stuff.
Right. And so I'm sure people would be curious to know, what does that look like pragmatically, like practically, because you're interfacing those two sort of paradigms very directly and personally. And why would these people come to see you in the first place? I mean, wouldn't they think you're really woo-woo?
Well, I think potentially most of them have been referred to me by their children or whatever.
Okay.
And reflexology it's a very practical art. So, like, if you have back pain, I can work a specific part of your pain to bring relief. I also can help a lot with neuropathy and neuralgia. Like, so, diabetics love it because they don't have feeling in their feet. I've helped people not lose their feet. And so there's very practical reasons to see a
Yes,
reflexologist.
yes, 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 yes. And
I
so,
don't,
go ahead.
I just don't get into a lot. I don't do the woo woo with them. I
Right,
just, I feel it's just an opportunity to create relationship and build bridges.
right. And they do, and their perception of who you are, I guess, may not be a barrier in these cases.
Um, I think because they don't like the first interactions that I have with them are I'm helping them, I'm
Right.
kind and I'm compassionate. Like I had this one guy who's super libertarian, like radically so in my mind. And he would and we'd been working with each other and he would get stirred up about some propaganda thing and he would talk about goddamn liberals and or excuse my French, I'm probably not supposed to swear, right?
No,
Goddamn
I think it's okay.
Democrats, whatever. He was going on a rant, and I said, you know what? You could probably consider me a goddamn liberal, and I'm probably a little bit communist and a little bit socialist, and I'm a tree hugging, rock picking, mountain loving
Hmm.
environmentalist. And I said, and you still like me, right? And he took a moment and he said, you're right. I do still like you.
That's hilarious. Now you grew up there, so you've been a resident of that area for a very long time.
Yeah, I tried to run away a few times.
Well,
Um,
because I was going to ask, like, because some people might be thinking, okay, why? I mean, it's a very beautiful, it's a very beautiful country,
yeah,
very attractive and very outdoorsy kind of, and
yeah.
but there must have been times when you thought, oh, I should go escape.
Oh yeah. Well, when I was 18 or before I was even 18, I was in junior high and my friend and I were going, okay, we're going to get go-go boots and we're going to get a motorcycle and we're going to California, right? I've always so that was my dream, to flee here, right? Because sometimes you don't know what you got. And then when I went off to school, I went to a very liberal arts college. And, at the time, again, they there was a bunch, they said that's where only the pinko commies go, right? And and I go, I'm down, and I went and studied Russian. So then they really called me a commie. But I have tended to always come home. And like you said, I think I'm so connected to the mountains and the water. And my grandmother was born here. And when she died, she said her only regret was that she didn't stand up for the trees. So
Oh, oh,
I have environmentalists in my family. My
yeah.
great grandmother was a Trotskyite, you know.
Hmm.
So I have a kind of a progressive. I come from on site, even though there's conservative parts from my family. I come from a very forward thinking family.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God. I mean, it's difficult to grow up being very different from your family, which I did.
Well, on one,
I was kind of like the black sheep in my family in a lot of ways.
well, I still think I am the black sheep in my family. My brother always told me they found me under a rock, and when I got in the rock shop, I thought, well, maybe he was right. Maybe I am from, maybe I am from the rock people. But at the same time, the part of my mother was super psychic. She knew
Was
when
she
the
open about it?
no. I
Oh,
think no. I mean, we knew that she knew when people died. We knew that she knew who was calling on the phone.
no.
Um,
Wow.
but I don't think I knew the extent of it until she was dying, and I went to her library, and she had the Edgar Casey books, and she had the reincarnation of
Ah.
Bridie Murphy. And so she was way into this, but she was very closeted.
Well, that's what I was
And
just going to say. It was so sad that she wasn't able to
yeah,
discuss that or share
yeah.
that. That must have been very difficult and lonely in a lot of ways for her.
I think that led to her depression and her drinking, and
Oh,
I think that that's the time that she was living in, you know. And my grandfather on my other side was basically a ghost whisperer. When people died, they'd come to him and ask him to pass messages
unbelievable. On the other side.
on my dad's side.
So the two, both lineages have these abilities.
But they were also like, my grandma was so afraid of those ghosts that she asked my grandpa to quit doing it, and he did.
Oh,
So again, it's like, and then our ancestors say, okay, maybe it's not time, but now those gifts that our ancestors carry, we have, and now's the time. And that's potentially back to your why you're getting these people around you, is that it's time, game is on.
well, that's what I think. Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, there's something going on for sure. I think it's we're coming out of this phase of being kind of shut down and things are going to open up. That's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a lot of Piscean energy in your chart, right? So you have a stellium in Pisces. So you're a very intuitive and receptive and psychic
Naive,
type of
loosely
person.
tethered, all those things, the good and the bad of Pisces, I am.
Yeah. So um, you know, okay, so that's really interesting because uh there wouldn't be necessarily a lot of people like yourself, but you in that area, but you have a social network of people that kind of can support you with this kind of stuff, right? Locally.
Yeah, and because I had the shop, and then I was lucky enough to have a roommate whose father led sweat lodges, and so I've really needed that grounding, those grounding spiritual practices. Otherwise, I'd be in the ethers. I would be, you know,
Feeling
trance
grounded.
channeling. Yeah, that's luckily I've had teachers that helped me be in my body and ground me.
Well, I'm always harping on about being grounded, and I always especially people who have strong sort of psychic placements in their charts. Um, I think it's critical. Grounding, protection, clearing. I did some early on. I did some episodes with some little rituals for that because it's such a core thing. It's not necessarily time consuming, but I do that stuff like at least when I'm doing my spiritual practices, I do it every day,
Yep,
and I even do it when I feel off.
yep, yep.
So it can be multiple times a day sometimes.
Well, and I think I didn't realize how ungrounded I was until I got into the rock shop. And I think the first stone I really felt it was as I picked up a piece of pyrite, and it yanked me into my body. And I'm going,
Cool.
oh my God, this is what it feels like. Because it was really easy for me to be in other people's business. That's a very Piscean thing. I knew what they were feeling and what was going on in their body way before I had any self awareness of what was happening.
Right. Interesting.
And
And
that's also,
go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, and that's also partially because I grew up with my alcoholic mother. It was a codependency, or, it was a coping mechanism.
Right. Yeah, the fourth house.
Yeah. To keep
Yeah,
other people okay, to help other people be okay. I had to leave my body to make sure they were okay. Or
right.
that's what I thought I did.
Well, I'm glad you're an advocate of the grounding stuff too, because it's super critical. And like even like yesterday, I was in a very high energetic state, and I was just like I was emailing with somebody about payment issues about for a reading, and I was just like I kept like I was confusing details and stuff. It was embarrassing, but that's because just I was in such a high state, I was just like hardly here.
Right. Well, and so like the rocks helped me, and then I realized how important it was that I
Yeah, that too.
drink water. I have to do my physical yoga practice every day, because it brings me into my body. I really work I shouldn't say it's not so much work as it is now. It's more natural now. And now I know when I'm not, it feels, I'm going, oh, you're not grounded right now. And so then I do what I need to do. But those things that knock us out of our bodies so easily.
Yeah, I'm emphasizing this point because I just think that a lot of people overlook it. And to me, it's like literally the first thing I do in my spiritual practice. Like when I
Mm-hmm.
stop to do my spiritual practice, the very first thing I do is grounding.
Mm-hmm.
I never do any spiritual work without grounding first.
Yep. Well, and if we, I mean, because I am Pisces and I have been very Piscean, I've been super naive, right? And haven't had super good discernment and was easily influenced, I think, to a big extent because I wasn't in my body and I wasn't trusting or even aware of my gut knowing.
Yeah, well, that is kind of a Pisces thing, is the boundaries issue, right? Lack of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
But
good that
how,
you mastered that, because it's good that you mastered that, because I've had a lot of, like, my best friend for many years is a Pisces, and I've had quite a few Pisces friends, and there's they can be extremely creative, which is amazing. But yeah, there is those issues around boundaries and grounding.
well, and I don't know that I've mastered it. I still have to practice it every day.
Well, I think the fact that you do, though, is a form of mastery.
Well, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And we have the crystals thing in common too. That
well,
was
that was
another
another
thing.
thing. Yeah, I think that's another reason I reached out to you because a
Yeah.
Moldavite man.
Right. We both had powerful Moldavite experiences. Holy crap. Like, just stunning. Like, I could not, I don't know if I can even describe my first experience with Moldavite. I was I was in this really beautiful shop. Like, the woman who curated this shop, she taught courses, like really advanced courses on crystals and stuff. She was brilliant. And she had the most stunning crystals. Like I I hesitated to go there just because I would spend all my spare money.
Yeah,
But so I was in there on one occasion, and I was actually looking for a piece of moldavite because I had picked up a smaller piece somewhere else, but I was just curious about getting a nicer example. And so she brought out her little stash and showed me them, and I picked one up, and I held it in my hand, and my legs literally almost buckled.
mm,
And
yeah.
I was just like, "Oh my God, like, this is so crazy." And I just looked at her, and she goes like, "Yeah, you get it." She's like, "Some people just don't get that from it." But I'm like, "Well, I sure as hell do." I was just like, I was stunned. The effect, because by then I'd experimented with a lot of crystals, but I was stunned at how the potency of it, because there's a lot of fake moldavite around that is just literally not moldavite at all. I would say
Right.
probably the majority of it. This was real because she had very good suppliers. But anyway, what's your story?
Well, so before I even opened my shop, I went to this gosh, well, oh, it was a crystal conference. And the guy who kind of wrote the book on Moldavite, he wrote the Book of Stones. He did a
Oh,
whole
really?
thing about, yeah,
Oh, you
Robert,
met him. What was his name
yeah,
again?
Robert
It,
Simmons.
Simmons. Yes, I love that book.
And so he talked about his Moldavite experience. And then I bought my first piece of Moldavite and I put it in, I like those little, what do they call it? Gravel pit
Pouches.
on a string, like medicine
Pouches.
bags.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. The little leather
um,
ones.
yeah. And
Yeah,
so
I have those.
I put that in my pouch. I was in the
Were
first
you
piece
wearing it?
well, the first piece I bought was when I was at the gem show in Tucson, and
Yeah,
stone people come from all over the world. And
right.
so I bought my first piece of Moldavite
Yeah.
and put it in my little pouch, and almost immediately I started having heart palpitations.
That's what
And
I meant when I said, when you're wearing it, were you wearing your pouch?
I put it right over my heart, and
Oh
then
my
it's
God. That's why I was asking. Because so what happens is that often people who are into crystals have these little leather pouches. They're, maybe this smaller than an orange, typically. It depends, but they have a string that you put it around your neck and you wear it. So it's like literally sitting on your heart chakra,
Yes.
which would be
Yes.
crazy with your first experience with
Yes.
those.
And so I was with somebody who was more practiced with crystals, and she told me, she gave me a piece of jet, and she said, "Here,
I
put this
love
in
jet.
there." I love jet too. So she put it in there with I put it in there with the moldavite, and it calmed down the heart palpitations. But I but I continued to wear the moldavite, and with the jet, so I could like be in my body. But then the next thing I knew I started getting these electrical shocks in my body. And they were I knew enough about the meridian system at the time, and that they were like going through the gallbladder. And then I realized, I did some research and found out that the Aquarian energy rules the gallbladder. And then I realized every time the moon was in Aquarius, I would get those electrical shocks through my meridian system.
Every time the moon
And
was in Aquarius?
yes, because
Cool.
and then because but Moldavite is an Aquarian age stone. It's a stone for the Aquarian.
Right. That's probably why I resonated with it so much.
So I had this whole teaching from Moldavite about the moon and the astrology and
Cool.
the meridian system. And then I learned that when there was solar flares, those electrical shocks were even more intense.
Very cool. I always described it to people as having this extraterrestrial kind of energy about it. Like it's
Totally,
almost alien.
totally, totally. So Aquarian people really like it. That's my experience in the shop. Aquarians really like it. Tauruses feel grounded by it. That was surprising to me, but Taurians felt
That is
grounded. Taurians felt grounded by it, and Virgos were afraid of it. I
Virgos
had
were
a couple,
afraid of it.
well, because I had a couple women who were really drawn to it. Come to find out, they were both Virgos, and they both bought it. One Virgo bought it, and her life started changing so fast that she put it in a little bag, put it in a cupboard, and locked the door, thinking that was going to slow her life down. Another woman who was a Virgo had been debating about buying a piece of moldavite for about a year because she knew it was going to change her life. And and so then she finally bought one, and within 2 weeks she got a DUI, and she came back and said, I want to thank you because that moldavite changed my life. I stopped drinking. She said she chanted Waheguru the whole time she was in jail.
Oh, the poor thing. I mean, Jesus.
But life, if if you make a commitment to get that moldavite, because they're not cheap, so there's a commitment involved usually,
Yeah.
then it will bring changes.
Yeah. I laid down with it because I used to meditate with my crystals. And
Right.
I once put it on my third eye and I lay down and after a bit of time, it was like crazy because I'm kind of nuts. But there was a loud pop that I swear was audible. Like it was like a crack after like a few minutes. And I had to stop. And I'm like, what the hell was that? What just happened? Like, did it open up my third eye chakra or what? But it was I literally got up and looked around and went like, where did that noise come from? Because it was in my head,
Right.
but it was loud.
And what
Yeah.
did you notice afterwards?
Well, I mean, I'm always doing stuff, right? I'm always pushing the limits. So I'm kind of, I'm an Aries rising, so I'm kind of like, damn the torpedoes. So I'm always going through dramatic experiences.
Right.
It's
So
just
you
part.
don't
So I
know
can't I can't
exactly.
necessarily attribute because at that time I was doing so much work on so many different levels of yoga and I've done Kriya yoga, I've done Kundalini yoga, I've done meditation, mantras, I've done like all kinds of rituals and things like so it's hard for me to attribute to is any one specific event to any particular outcome.
And I think I'm kind of the same way, but I'm a little bit more of a citizen scientist. So as a citizen scientist, I have my theories, and then I try not to mix too many medicines at one time because then I don't know what caused it.
Yeah, I mean, how do I describe that? Well, I've had periods where I spent as many as 4 or 5 hours a day doing spiritual practice.
Wow.
So, and I journal, right? And
Right.
sometimes I look back at my journals and I go like, holy crap, right? Like some of these kriyas, like which are kriyas are, it's like it's a Kundalini yoga set of mudras and mantras and postures. And so the word for that is kriya. And some of these kriyas you can do for different lengths of time, and you can do them for different periods. So
Right.
I have done ones for as many as 120 days, and I did one for like 46 days once where I had to get up before dawn every day. And if you miss a day, you have to start over.
Hmm.
And like I've had some periods where I was really doing a lot of intentional, very focused and intense work. And when I was doing Kriya yoga, which I don't you haven't done Kriya yoga, have you?
I've never done, there's not anybody around here who's ever taught it, so I've never experienced it.
Yeah, it's an ancient of course they all derive from India, but it's a very
Right.
ancient path and tradition. It's kind of if you've read Autobiography of a Yogi, it's that lineage.
And I think I've read that. Um,
Probably.
how's it different than Kundalini?
Well, it involves there's more hatha involved in it in the
Okay.
yoga part. Uh, but there was also a lot of mantras
Okay.
which were just practiced on their own without any kind of posture necessarily or hand
Okay.
movements or mudras, right?
Right.
So,
Okay.
like I did mantras for 100, which I repeated 120 times a day indefinitely. And the one I was doing at the time was a Sanskrit mantra that was 17 words long. So
Okay.
to do 17 words 120 times,
Yeah,
and
that's
Sanskrit is a complicated language.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very different from English.
Right.
So,
Right.
it's a very different. I mean, I loved I loved I loved Kriya Yoga, but Kriya Yoga also had a lot of kind of structures around lifestyle too.
Right.
So
Right.
it's a very demanding path,
Okay.
right? It
Yeah.
involves a real serious commitment to, and I was initiated into a few levels of Kriya Yoga, but I didn't go all the way to like teacher level or whatever, which is a very intensive process. And it requires like real discipline, like really hardcore.
And does it I mean, I think that's one of the differences between Kundalini and some of the other yogas is the idea that Kundalini yoga is self-initiated. So there's no guru. There's nobody telling you what kriyas you can and cannot do or shouldn't do.
Well, there is no literal guru in Kriya Yoga either, or at least none that are
Okay.
in a material world.
Okay. Okay.
So there's no figurehead, but there are some sort of ancient people who, because it's a very ancient tradition, and there are some non-material entities involved with it. Um, but it is about self-mastery. It's not about. It's not like it's not religious.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm just saying I'm just saying uh, it is a hardcore. It requires a lot of discipline and focus to really
Well, and if
go
you
down that
say
path.
just the idea, so is it, would you call, I mean, and again, one of the other things they talk about with Kundalini is that it's a householder's practice.
Right.
So you, I mean, very few people have time to do 5 hours of yoga a day.
No, I know, and I had to stop because of COVID, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was doing this at a time and I was living in Ottawa, and um this is kind of a funny story, but I started to get this opportunity came up to do something out here on the east coast of Canada where I am right now. And I kept getting pushed to come here to leave Ottawa. and I was really in resistance because I was kind of like, oh my God, this is amazing. I just want to keep doing spiritual work. Why are you pushing me? Why do you want me to stop? It doesn't make any sense, right? So I leave and come here, and literally within a week or two, the whole COVID thing just went crazy. So I think I had to leave Ontario because of COVID, not because of my spiritual practice.
Oh, right.
But my
As
my
you,
point though is that my point though is that I was in a fortunate situation there because my overhead was really low, that I could scrape by really easily, which allowed me to just really focus on all that spiritual stuff, which I'd probably still be doing if I could.
yeah, I think the ability, I mean, to have that kind of discipline, I mean, that a lot of people don't have that kind of discipline, so that just says a lot about your character.
Well, I wouldn't I'm just super passionate about it, and I'm intense. So like if I'm really into something, I go full full bore into it. But I would say this, like even if somebody is like marginally disciplined, if you ever get the chance or it arises in your life where you can do something like that, where you can go really
Right,
into like meditation
right,
and getting into
right,
spiritual practice, like at least try it sometime
right.
because it's a wonderful, like I had so many mind-blowing experiences, psychic experiences and stuff during that time that I could like write a whole book about it.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I had beings from the uh Kriya yoga tradition, like semi-materialize in front of me in my apartment
Wow.
and
Wow.
speak to me. like I'm a, and I knew instantly who they were. I was just like, whoa. Now, that's not typically the kind of stuff I talk about because people would think I should be in a mental institution. But I'm you're probably not going to do that to me, are
Of course not. Well, no, because
you?
well, I think the closest thing that I had to do, the closest, I mean, I'm kind of what you would call like a lazy yogi. I mean, I do my practice every day, but because of my work and potentially my ability to focus, I don't, I don't know that I could do 5 hours of yoga, but we would do a 24-hour chant on the winter solstice where we would sit and chant for we would do the long echo cars for 24 hours.
Wow.
And
Individually, or like you would do the whole 24 hours yourself?
I would try, but then
Wow.
we always tried to have some, at least one person chanting, right?
Right. So it
Because
never breaks, right? You never
it
break the
never
pattern.
breaks. And there was one point that I felt like I kind of got where you're talking about is that what I felt like was I went into what I call the realm of the gurus. And they all, they kind of had that maroon color or that gold color, the robes that they wear,
Yep, yep, yep. I can
the
picture
the
them.
um, the Buddhist monks or whatever,
Hmm.
and
Beautiful colors.
it was that realm. The realm was that I felt like I was in a different realm, and
Mm.
these gurus were showing themselves to me, and then the last guru that showed himself to me was like he had the face of the Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland, and I started laughing and I came back to reality.
Uh, yeah. I mean, there's uh, there's there's certain things that I just won't talk about, right? Um,
Right.
because they will be misconstrued or misunderstood.
Sure.
And actually, a spiritual teacher of mine once said that you shouldn't really discuss your peak spiritual experiences too much because other people's mental projections will bring them down
Oh, isn't that? Well, I've heard that.
and
That's
erode
true.
them. Pardon me?
I, yeah, I guess I've heard that too from a little bit different perspective that to share them with other people, like it takes you that just this act of speaking it. Sometimes we need to hold stuff close to us.
Yeah, I remember there was uh like for example, there was someone I used to work with who was a channel. That's a mind-blowing channel, like unbelievable. Um very gifted. And I did a reading with her. She did readings for me a few times, but we also talked quite a bit for a period. And we weren't supposed to talk about the reading for a week after.
Yep. Yep. I've heard that.
because it had to crystallize within us.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise,
so
you lose
yeah,
it.
you'd be walking around with your mouth zipped, going like, "Oh my God, I want to talk about this, but I can't." Like a week.
Yeah.
And then on
I
and then and then on the and then on that time and at that hour, you'd be like, "Okay, I can tell you everything. I got to talk about it."
well, because I think we lose energy when we talk about some really potent experiences.
Yeah, you need to own it, and it needs to be ingrained within you so that it can't just
Right.
be dispersed.
Right. I
Right.
like that idea of the positive aspect of crystallization.
Yeah, and so there's magic involved in these ideas and thought
Yeah.
forms and
Yeah.
experiences. And so, like I struggle with this a bit because like on my channel, there's all kinds of stuff I would just love to talk about. But I'm always kind of not always, but I often kind of second guess myself going like, "Oh, how far do I go?" What do I express? What do I say? What do I don't? What do I keep to myself? And because I want to be of service ultimately. And I would actually sacrifice some parts of myself to be of service if it would be helpful to other people. But I
Right.
don't want to diminish myself too much at the same time.
Right. Right. Because I think some of these experiences, by sharing them, and sharing them with clarity and discernment,
Yeah,
we actually open the door for people to not think they're crazy, to be honest.
absolutely. That's why it's so important. Like some of the people I've done readings for recently are really in kind of deep red areas.
Hmm.
And there there was one person I did a reading for fairly recently who like just never talks about this stuff with anyone locally.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's really sad.
That,
That's
yeah.
really sad. And so you shut down, right? Which is not what the world needs right now. It needs kind of the opposite. We need to channel and bring all this energy in and express it. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, so then creating safe spaces for authentic communication is really important.
Yeah, and what you said is the basic expression of that, which is just so that other people know they're not crazy. In fact, one of the episodes I want to talk about, I might even be able to kind of cover it right here, but it's just basically that this idea that, there's a lot of people who, not a lot, there's some people who comment and they're fantastic because, other people read the comments even if they don't respond. And so I think that's fantastic because when the people do that, they're basically saying, "Yeah, me too," kind of thing, right? Or here's
Mhm.
my angle on it, or whatever. It's creating an opening. And YouTube is a bit weird because sometimes comments they come through, but they don't actually display, and it's like who knows
Oh.
why, right? It's probably the algorithms or something. It's kind of it's their commenting system leaves a bit to be desired. But um on the other side of that, though, there's probably a lot of people who listen to things like this and
There's a
never
lot.
really, in the old days, we used to call them lurkers.
That's
And
exactly what I was thinking.
yeah, and that's not a pejorative. It's just
No.
somebody who observes without actually engaging.
Right.
And it's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to do an episode where I was basically saying that, you know, um, that I know that those people are there and that's fine.
And they're welcome. And if because that's that thing, like when we first start going through awakening, when I first started going through my awakening, there weren't these kinds of social supports, you
No.
know,
Yeah.
and these places, even now, there are. I am not a huge commenter. I mean, there's certain feel people that I or groups of people that I'll feel safe to comment on the videos, but a lot of times I don't feel safe to comment on videos. Not
Mm.
that I'm afraid of. Floy, there's a little bit of me that now there's this troll. The trolls. I don't. I'm not really hep on trolls, but I think that ability, because like what you have done, you're creating this community on Facebook, you're creating this community on YouTube. I don't know where else you are, where it's safe to explore some of these ideas and not feel like you're going to get arrested for being crazy or
Yeah, I can share this. Like, you know, I had kind of some weird experiences when I was young, starting when I was in early starting when I was a young child, and then up through my teens and everything. I think I had my first really significant spiritual experience. I believe I was 17, but there was a period around when I left home, which was just after high school, so I was like 18, and I encountered kind of this crowd, and I instantly knew that these were kind of like my people. And my life changed instantly simply by connecting with the right people. So I know how significant and important that is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's absolutely critical because
Yeah.
at the you don't necessarily have to share the exact same opinions on everything, but you know that there's a place for you there that you belong and that you can express yourself
Yeah.
without fear.
Right.
Fear
Right.
is like one of the most challenging things we have to overcome
Yeah.
and the most detrimental. So yeah, that space is absolutely important, and I do believe that especially with Pluto moving into Aquarius, we're going to see a lot more people um, beginning to question and seek out. And I think one of the people I did a reading for teaches hatha yoga, and she said that she's been having experiences lately with more people coming to her, going like, I'm not even sure why I'm here, but I want to explore this.
Well, that's awesome because I think I sort of think like Hatha um, is a great door opener for people,
Right.
and it's a that I started doing Hatha. Well, I don't know if they didn't call it that then, but now I know it was Hatha from like back in my 20s. And the guy who taught it was a concrete worker who had broken his back,
Ah,
and the only way he got off his back was by or get off the couch after breaking his back was started to do yoga. And so then he became a teacher. That was the first time I ever really experienced what presence came from breathing.
yeah, it's very simple, eh?
Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for some people, it's things like acupuncture. For some, like there's all kinds of different entry points out there that, and even some forms of massage can release energies and tensions and stuff very deeply, depending on who you're dealing with.
Well, and I think that's where that whole idea of being finding out who you can trust, right? Because there was I have a friend who's a therapist, and she's been a therapist for a long time, and she works a lot with people who have a dissociative disorders, or like their trauma. When their trauma gets triggered, they do the fight, flight, freeze, or disassociate thing, right?
Right.
And she was talking about how many people are, because of what's happening in the world, are their trauma triggers are up right. And
Really? This was a
yes,
recent conversation?
yeah, just last week, that their trauma triggers are up, and um, they don't even know that that it's trauma triggers. But she's had enough
Right.
experience it, and some of them are responding to their trauma triggers with
Drugs and stuff.
by pardon me.
Drugs and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of that. That's part of the problem, isn't it? That people don't know how to process because our culture sucks at dealing with that kind of stuff.
Right. And even, and I have no judgment of the plants or the medicine, but they're all the ethnogens that are being used right now. It's sacred medicine. And if you're if you don't digest or process what the information or the teaching the plant gives you, and then you just keep doing it more and more and more, you create the same problems.
Well, I was going to say earlier, like I was talking about that period. That was one period in my life where I was doing a lot of spiritual work. Um,
Hmm.
Most recent period like that, there have been others, but I meant to say that like I had like absolutely incredible, mind-blowing experiences with zero drugs. Like, I'm not anti things like ayahuasca necessarily, although I think people with probably with mental health issues should be cautious. But um my point is just that it's not actually even necessary.
And that's what Kundalini has made me realize. Um, and I think the my experience, and I don't, it's not a judgment, it's just an observation that a lot of times people start these practices because of the spiritual experiences. They kind of almost become addicted to spiritual phenomena,
Yeah, yes.
which I think is fun and great and everything. But what I've come to realize that, again, I don't need those drugs.
Right.
And in fact, it's not my medicine,
Yeah.
that, and I have no problem having spiritual phenomena because just the way I'm wired, I want to be as present as I can. So I
Yeah.
can, that's really where I've come from. I love like having a good meditation and having my grandma show up, and
Hmm.
talk to me and stuff, which is great. It's easier to talk to my grandma sometimes, who's
You, you,
dead, than it is
you,
for me to talk to like somebody at the grocery store.
well, I'll give you another example. I lately, this has been going on for a while now, but lately it's been up for me, is that when I find that I have been of service to somebody, that I've helped them, or in, because people sometimes, thank me for certain things. Um, I get like such a huge rush out of that. That's just being of service. Like, that doesn't
Yes.
require any discipline, really. I mean, you know what I mean? It's not a spiritual practice, but it is at the same time.
It is. Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's like to really be of service, presence is such an important part of that.
It is so rewarding.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's the most rewarding. And I know, because some of the people that I've done readings for recently do this kind of work on an ongoing basis, and I know, you know, people know people know exactly what I'm referring to. But
Mhm.
um but then there's periods of time, like in life, if say you're going through certain difficult transits. I mean, you might be just focused on survival, right? Like, we can't always necessarily be in a position to be of service. We can always hold as high ethical standards as we can, but I'm
Mhm.
trying to make the point that that people shouldn't feel pressured to be of service.
Right. Right. Because then it can be just then it becomes codependence
Yeah,
sometimes
like
because
a
you're not,
guilt trip or something.
yeah, and you're not putting your own oxygen mask on first because when you like, because as an empath codependent person like myself, I I think I've always been of service. That's what this lifetime is about, but I would often neglect my own needs
Hmm.
to care for others.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think then it can start to distort the work that I'm doing with other people.
Yeah. And that's another sort of Pisces quality too, is there is the risk of being manipulated too, right? Being taken advantage of.
Yeah, that is one. I have better boundaries now, thank you.
Yeah, but it's because you're not naive isn't really the right word, but there's a tendency to be sort of just too, what's the right word I'm looking for? Why isn't it coming to my brain?
Well,
Um,
sensitive, but also I feel really bad when other people suffer.
yeah, too empathic, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
because there are people out there who will take advantage, right?
right,
It's a hard line to walk, that
right.
try and
Well,
figure out,
and
you know.
yeah, and then I think for me personally, it's been um most because I grew up in an alcoholic home. I didn't know what was mine to fix and what wasn't, and so being it kind of dealing with some of my codependency issues and just holding space for people while they suffer. Sometimes I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is just listen or just like energetically hold space for them and not try
Right.
to fix them.
Well, that brings up, and we've been talking for quite a while, so I don't know how far we could probably talk for hours, but
We probably could.
we probably have to be somewhat reasonable, because
Yeah.
not everybody has nothing to do with their lives. Um, but like
This is my
us,
work.
right? But I was going to say, because it just triggered a thought, because one of the things I've been experiencing, like really recently, like in the past little while, is I think that the veils are dropping substantially more, in the sense that I'm having kind of psychic exchanges with people on levels that I don't normally do. And it can even be people I'm not directly connected with, like interpersonally. I've been experiencing that lately, and I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And because I think I actually even talked about this in my Pluto and Aquarius video, that telepathy and stuff is
All
going to
right.
become a thing,
Right. Right.
right? And I like, for example, even you and me, I wouldn't be surprised if I've had that experience. I have had that experience with other people in the past, but not very common, not commonly. But I'm starting to experiencing it on a broader scale. Like we can connect to other people and situations psychically in a more conscious way than we could in the past, and I think that's part of the shift we're going through. So my whole
Right.
point of all that was is that we are more sensitive to people energetically than we used to be.
Mhm.
And someone like yourself who's you're in close proximity to people, you know, it's just something to be aware of.
Right. And that's why I think I just have to practice really good spiritual hygiene.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I have, like, I think I also have tools now that I didn't have when I first started. Like
Right.
I think the Akashic Records helps to be clear, helps with my clarity. There's something about opening up the records helps me be super clear.
Well, now you haven't described that though. You haven't defined what that means.
So this is how I perceive it. So I was taught by this woman who told us that there is this um, realm of knowledge or frequency that all humans can access, right? But what she said is that most of us don't go into them intentionally.
Hmm.
And when she taught me that to open up the records with clarity, and intention, and then the person could ask me questions and I would get the answers. But that never felt really clean to me, potentially because I think people have their own answers. Sometimes we need clarity, but I think my clarity comes in asking the question in such a way that they can get their own answer. So I open up their records, I work on their feet. I can do it distance too. I mean, I can do it on the phone. But I open up their records, I ask them questions, and they get their own clarity. And Velvet, the ego, the part of me that is a fixer, doesn't seem to be is rarely involved in that conversation anymore.
Which is pretty cool because there's no like intermediary effectively.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's part of your practice in reflexology. But I think you described it to me before that it just happens sort of spontaneously, right?
For a lot of people, it does happen spontaneously.
Yeah. And so they're not even necessarily aware of what's going on.
I think
Like
there's a lot of
intellectually.
here. Yeah, I think you're probably in the records a lot. A lot of psychics are in the records.
Yeah.
I think it's an expanded state of consciousness that all humans have access to.
Yeah.
In
Go
In
ahead.
Kundalini, they talk about how we have 10 bodies: our physical body, our mental bodies, the three mental bodies, our aura, our arc line, blah, blah, blah. And there's two, they say, that um, when we die, they leave and go back to wherever our soul comes from. And it's our soul body and what's called the subtle body. And they believe that those are housed below our feet in the earth,
Right.
and that the subtle body protects the soul body. It's around the subtle body, and it's through the subtle body in the earth that we access our records. So it's our records, and then when we go through an awakening, then that subtle body and the soul rise up, start making our bones vibrate. That's how I perceive it. They
Yeah.
increase our frequency so we can
Yeah.
hold a higher consciousness and have constant access to those records.
It's interesting, the person who I was talking about before who did the channeling
Right.
and that I had the readings with, her technique, and she was accessing the Akashic records, but it was an indigenous technique from the West Coast.
Mm, interesting.
So it's part of their tradition.
Yeah. Okay.
But they went to the keepers of the records.
That's when I open the records. I always talk to the keepers of the records.
Isn't that
I ask
fascinating?
permission. I ask permission to
Yeah.
work with the records from the keepers of the
Yeah,
records.
she did a pipe ceremony.
Oh, interesting.
Hmm. So there's another point of mutual connection there between us.
Right.
I've had
Okay.
that experience, and those readings, because I have recordings of them, I have referred to them at different times over years, and they are still unfolding.
Yeah, because yeah, that would make sense.
It's fascinating.
Well, because the records are, I mean, they're not just about now. They're not just about the past. They're not
No,
just about the future. They're like multiple timelines, and
right.
there's, I mean, it's in some ways it can blow your mind what's held in the records.
Yeah, I formed a real attachment to those beings because I would have these really interesting conversations. I actually had arguments with them too, by the way. Um, because I say, well, that doesn't make sense. That's contradictory, and we'd get into it. But uh, and they would laugh at me. But
You just just like I did.
yeah, exactly. Uh, and they'd say, "We love you, John." I'd be like, "Okay, well, that's good." But yeah, that's interesting because that's kind of like what you're doing in your daily practice with people.
Mhm. And it, again, to kind of bring it around, it just helps me to be cleaner and not codependent, not trying to
Right.
fix people.
Yeah, yeah, because the ego can be very pernicious and sneaky, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's something we need to talk a little more about, to be honest with you, because uh, not a lot of people talk about it.
The ego.
No.
Huh.
Well, and the role that it plays in spiritual development and evolution,
Oh, right, 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 right,
and
right,
even things like psychic phenomenon and all that stuff.
right.
Right? It's very,
Okay.
we're not going to get into it now because I think we've already been talking for an hour and a half or an hour and 15 or 20 minutes anyway. So we
Okay.
probably, as much as
Might
I,
want to wrap it up, huh? Is that what you're
well,
thinking?
probably because, if people find this interesting, we can do it again.
Okay.
But how many people have like 2 hours it's like a movie.
Well, do you know how to, and you can cut this later, but do you know how to put in, there's some people who do videos that will have little topics and people can push right on that little,
Yeah, they're called chapters.
yeah.
But to
So,
go through an hour and 20-minute long thing and chapterize it and everything, it's like a
oh,
lot of work.
that's true.
And I don't know if I have that much time right now.
Okay. Well,
Maybe
and
maybe
for
someday I'll be rich and I'll be able to just pay people to do all this stuff.
well,
But
for future reference, there's a way, and I don't know how to do it, but I've seen people who do hour and a half, 2 hour YouTube videos, and they put those little chapters in as they're talking. So it's done, and you're not have to go back and listen to the whole thing.
oh, I don't know if you can do that on Zoom. I'll have to research that.
Oh, right. I guess it
I
is. I
like
don't.
I can go back because I'm not going to get into all the technical stuff now, right? Because who cares?
Right.
But
Right.
I can do that. But we've kind of been flowing all over the place. I'm not really sure there is a lot of chapters.
Okay. Well, so then just to be the devil's advocate, I will put on a long, like I know there are some people that I listen to that talk for an hour and a half or 2 hours. To me, that's a really good time to plug into what they're talking about and clean my refrigerator
Yeah, that's
or
what I do.
so because I like to listen to those things, but I
Yeah.
don't just like to sit on my couch and listen. I like to like
Yeah.
somewhat it helps get some of those projects that I hate to do
Yeah,
done.
what you do is you get a pair of Bluetooth headphones or earbuds and your phone, put the phone in your pocket or on the counter or whatever, and you go about do your chores. That's what I do. Like I
So
listen to stuff while I'm at the grocery store. Like I'm always listening to stuff, podcasts, whatever. Because otherwise I'd just be sitting in front of my computer all day, which is kind of would drive me nuts.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's a problem. Now we didn't. I'm not sure if I'll include what we've just been talking about or not.
Okay,
I,
that's
I
fine.
might just so people know what we're thinking. But we didn't actually formally close out of the discussion.
Okay.
So
So
yeah, I mean, I think what we should say, what I would like to say is Because there's somebody else I did a reading for recently who I think I'm going to approach to do a conversation with as well, just because they're such a fascinating person, like you. But if people find this interesting, we'll do more of them, basically.
Okay.
And for you, if people want to get a hold of you, like, is that something that matters to you, or do you have a
Well, I
profile or
want to
part?
be of service, I want to just be of service. So whether the conversations that we're having help
Yeah,
people, or
yeah,
if they want to do a reading, I do teach my uh, one evening a week. I do an online Kundalini yoga class.
right.
Um, I want to be available because I think game is on, man.
Yeah, yeah. And you're a certified instructor for Kundalini Yoga, right?
Yes,
That means
yes.
you went through a fairly rigorous training.
Yes, and I've been a teacher for 11 years, so I've been teaching for quite a while.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You know what you're
And
doing.
and and what I know now, I know a lot more about the system and the technology and what Kriyas, how to help people do the Kriya in the way that supports them, not just read the Kriya as it's written, because some people, if they're like too fiery or too windy, some Kriyas are going to um, they're going to, it might move the energy, but they may not be able to, it might unground them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
so to be able to help people um, find a practice that they can do on their own, and or like live instruction is always really helpful, I think.
Yeah, I've experimented with quite a few different Kriyas, so uh they definitely have different energies and purposes and flavors for sure.
Well, and I
But
think what
I spent a lot of time researching and I bought books and stuff. And like
right,
someone like you have a tremendous amount of expertise. So you can also help people figure out
right, what would support them,
what might work for them specifically,
right.
right?
Right. And it'd be really fun. I know where this may not be on your video or on your recording, but it'd be really fun to, we talked about the 10 bodies and how that mixes with the Kundalini or with the
Hmm.
astrology chart.
Hmm.
So you tell me what their squares are, the trances are that they're facing. And there's a Kriya or a meditation that will support them.
Yeah, it's mind blowing, right? Really. Yeah. That's that's all. Like when I do readings for people, I'm what I'm usually focused on is like, why are you here? What did you incarnate to do? Right.
Right.
I'm not
And is
so
that
much like I can sort of see, for example, like when you're likely to meet somebody or whatever, but that's not my core mission.
well, and do they usually say, are they coming to you because they
Well, they
are
tend to
not?
be, yeah, they tend to be pretty spiritual people.
It's sort of like, I want to make sure I'm doing what I've come here to do.
Well, they're looking for clarity.
Right.
Um, and in some cases they're in a period of change and trying to understand what's triggering that,
Right.
and why it's happening. It there's a lot of variables, but we just end up usually talking a lot about the spiritual stuff typically.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you can blend it with practical stuff like what you're talking about with Kriyas and whatnot, that's really cool.
Right. And I think that, back to the closing that we were supposedly doing.
Yeah, what, like half an hour ago, you mean?
I want to support people. And so whether it's through our conversations or through Akashic readings or helping them find a career meditation that would support them where they are right now, I just I just want to be of support so they
Yeah, and
can
I
get
think
all.
you're also a very valuable resource in the sense that you have a lot of experience with all these things we've been talking about. You're based in a kind of red area.
Mhm.
So, and you've interacted with all different kinds of people on all different kinds of levels. And, there's like that's very valuable wisdom
Yeah.
for these times that we're in.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So
So I don't know how that factors in, but because I think that when we do service, whether it's astrology readings or reflexology or whatever, a lot of it is the actual interaction that occurs.
I think on some level it's that connection. People are hungry for real connection now,
Yeah.
real connection.
Yeah.
And I don't care what your political ideology is. I think people want connection, and especially the more intense things get. I think that being able to have somebody hear you, somebody you be able to express yourself authentically with people. It's really important.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. And I think those energies are going to really amp up, or that are already
Yeah.
starting, but that's going
Yeah.
to be a theme.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's probably a good place to leave it for now.
Okay.
Hopefully,
Thank you.
this recording works.
We'll find out.
Yeah, like the interface for Zoom on the computer is quite a bit different from what I'm used to on my phone. But okay, so cool. Do you have anything I can put like in the comments or whatever, a link or something if people want to get a hold
Sure.
of you? Like we don't want to publish your email address.
Well, I have one where I get junk mail.
Okay.
That's where I send people to that for any kind of business questions.
Okay. Okay, cool. And okay, well put this out there and see if people think we're nuts.
Yeah, not, hey, crazy like a fox, baby.
We could get locked up and we could just do Kundalini yoga or Kriya yoga all day.
Well, I told you that that's one of the reasons I started to do Kundalini yoga, because I thought this would be a great jailhouse yoga.
Well, you'd have lots of time.
I have lots of time. I could chant for like I could do that 5 hour thing that you're talking about.
There you go. Well, let's not put too much mental energy into that thought.
No, I'm not, but it's sort of like, you know what? If that's where I'm supposed to go, bring it on.
Right. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank
you
you.
and I will be talking more, and I'm sure everyone is going to love you.
Well, Odd Velvet, it's right there. Odd Velvet.
Cool. Okay, thanks, and we'll be in touch. We'll
Okay.
talk
All
soon.
right. Thanks, John. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye bye.